The morning sun filtered through the heavy curtains of the hotel room as Mei Lin ran her fingers over her watch. 6:30. She had been awake for hours already, her stomach tied in knots. Today was the day she had been preparing for since she was 9 years old. The opening round of the International Young Musicians competition. May's mother, Grace, was already bustling around their small hotel room, humming softly as she laid out May's competition outfit, a simple but elegant dark blue dress that complemented May's slender frame. "Are you sure I'm ready for this?" May asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Grace stopped what she was doing and sat beside her daughter on the bed. "You've been practicing 6 hours a day for years. Your teacher says you're the most gifted student she's ever had." "But this is different," May said, her unseeing eyes staring ahead. "Everyone else here can see the notes, the judges, the audience. They can watch other performers and learn from them." Grace took her daughter's hands, which were cool and slightly trembling. "And none of them can hear the way you do. None of them feel the music in their bones like you." May nodded slowly. Since losing her sight to an illness when she was 4, music had become her world. The piano keys under her fingers were as familiar as her own heartbeat. She could tell the difference between a perfectly tuned C-sharp and one that was slightly flat from across a room. Her teacher often said that what others saw as a disability had given May an extraordinary gift, the ability to hear music in its purest form. But this competition wasn't just about talent. It was about proving something, to herself, to the world, and to all the people who had whispered that her acceptance to the competition was just a publicity stunt. "Let's get you ready," Grace said, helping May to her feet. "We need to be at the concert hall by 8 for registration." The grand concert hall was buzzing with activity when they arrived. May could hear dozens of conversations, the soft strains of various instruments being warmed up in practice rooms down distant hallways, and the nervous tapping of feet against the marble floor. The air smelled of lemon polish, perfume, and anxiety. Grace guided May through the crowd toward the registration desk, narrating their surroundings in the quiet, descriptive way she had developed over the years. 3 steps up ahead. There's a group of people to our right. The registration table is straight ahead about 20 feet. As they approached the table, May could hear the shuffling of papers and the click of computer keys. "Name, please," a woman's voice said briskly. "Mei Lin," Grace answered, "for the piano division." There was a pause, the sound of more typing. "Ah yes, Mei Lin, 17, from Riverdale," Grace supplied. "She's playing Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor for the preliminaries." "I see," the woman said, her voice softening slightly. "And special accommodations have been noted. Someone will be available to guide you to the stage when your time comes, Miss Lin." May nodded, gripping her folding cane a little tighter. "Thank you, but I'd prefer if my mother could just tell me where the bench is." "I don't need help otherwise." "As you wish," the woman replied. "Your performance number is 23. Preliminaries begin at 10. Please be in the waiting area at least 30 minutes before your scheduled time." As they moved away from the table, May heard a new set of voices approaching, one belonging to a young man, nervous and deferential, and the other to an older man with a slight Eastern European accent, whose tone carried the unmistakable weight of authority. "Mr. Petrov, we're so honored to have you judging this year's competition," the younger voice was saying. "Your interpretation of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3 changed how I think about the piece entirely." "Yes, well, that recording was from my better days," the older man, Petrov, replied dismissively. "These days I find more satisfaction in identifying new talent. Though I must say the quality of applicants this year is questionable in some cases." May felt her mother stiffen beside her, and she knew Grace had heard too. "Oh?" the younger man asked. "This competition used to be purely about musical excellence," Petrov continued, his voice growing closer as they walked past May and her mother. "Now there are all these considerations, diversity quotas, charity cases. As if music cares about such things." May felt her cheeks grow hot. She knew without being told that Petrov had looked at her as he spoke. "But surely talent comes in all forms," the younger man suggested hesitantly. Petrov made a dismissive sound. "Music is not just about playing notes correctly. It is about connection, visual connection, reading the audience, communicating through expression. Without that—" His voice trailed off as they moved farther away, but his meaning hung in the air like a bad note. Grace squeezed May's arm. "Ignore him. He's just an old man with outdated ideas. But May couldn't ignore it. Viktor Petrov wasn't just any judge. He was a living legend in the classical piano world. A Russian prodigy who had defected to the West in the 1980s and gone on to become one of the most celebrated pianists of his generation. His opinion could make or break careers, and he clearly thought she didn't belong here. The practice room they were assigned was small but had good acoustics. May ran her fingers over the piano, getting a feel for the action of the keys, the resistance of the pedals. It wasn't as responsive as the grand piano she would play on stage, but it would do for warming up. As she began to play, she tried to push Petrov's words from her mind, focusing instead on the music. Chopin had written this ballade after leaving Poland during a time of political upheaval. May had always connected with the piece's sense of longing, its moments of both tenderness and fury. When she played it, she felt as though she was telling a story. Her story. A knock at the door interrupted her practice. Grace opened it and May heard a friendly female voice. "Hi there. I'm Zoe, one of the student volunteers. Just checking if you need anything. Water, snacks, and also to let you know you're on in about 40 minutes. We're fine, thank you," Grace replied. "Actually, could you tell us more about the judges? We know Viktor Petrov is one—" "Oh yes," Zoe said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Petrov is, well, he's brilliant but terrifying. He once made a cellist cry during the finals of the Budapest International. But don't worry too much about him. There are 4 other judges, including Diane Wu. She's much nicer. And Professor Hiroshi Tanaka from the Tokyo Conservatory." After Zoe left, May returned to the piano, but her fingers felt stiff with anxiety. What if Petrov was right? What if being blind did put her at a fundamental disadvantage? All her life she had worked to prove that her blindness didn't define her. But what if in this context it did? "Mom," she said finally, "maybe this was a mistake." Grace was beside her in an instant. "What do you mean?" "Maybe Petrov is right. Maybe I don't belong here." "Listen to me," Grace said firmly. "That man doesn't know you. He hasn't heard you play. When he does, he'll understand how wrong he is." May wasn't so sure, but she had come too far to back out now. The backstage area was chaotic, contestants pacing nervously, parents whispering last-minute advice, organizers rushing about with clipboards. May sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, listening to the muffled sounds of another pianist on stage. The boy's technique was impressive, but May could hear a slight stiffness in his interpretation, as if he was playing for the judges rather than from his heart. "Number 23, May Lin," a voice called. "You're on deck." Grace helped May to her feet. "Remember what Mr. Reynolds always tells you? Let the music breathe through you." May nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She could hear applause as the previous contestant finished, followed by the rustle of movement as he left the stage. Then it was her turn. The stage manager spoke quietly into her headset, then turned to May. "Ready?" May nodded, unfolding her cane. The stage manager started to take her arm, but Grace interjected. "Just tell her where the piano is, please. She prefers to walk independently. The stage is straight ahead, 15 steps. The piano is centered on the stage. The bench is pulled out about 2 feet from the keyboard." "Thank you," May said, taking a deep breath. As she stepped onto the stage, the sounds changed. The audience's murmurs became more distinct in the open space, and she could feel the vastness around her. She moved carefully forward, counting her steps, her cane tapping lightly against the polished wood floor. From the judges' table, she heard a sound, a sigh amplified by a microphone that someone had forgotten to mute. "Could we move things along, please?" It was Petrov's voice, impatient and cutting. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the audience. May felt her cheeks burn, but she continued forward until her cane touched the leg of the piano bench. Carefully, she folded her cane, set it down, and took her seat. The hall fell silent as she positioned her hands over the keys, finding her starting point by touch. In that moment of silence, May made a decision. She would not play for Petrov or the other judges. She would not play to prove anything to anyone. She would play for herself and for the music, and then she began. The first notes of Chopin's ballad flowed from May's fingers, filling the concert hall with a gentle, almost questioning melody. She felt the familiar calm that always came when she played, the outside world fading as she surrendered herself to the music. For nearly 2 minutes she played flawlessly, her body swaying slightly as the piece built in intensity. The audience was silent, captivated. Even backstage, other contestants paused their warm-ups to listen. Then came the difficult passage, a series of rapid arpeggios that cascaded like water, requiring both technical precision and emotional control. May had practiced this section hundreds of times, but today, with Petrov's words still ringing in her ears, her concentration faltered. Her right hand slipped, hitting a wrong note that seemed to hang in the air like a shard of glass. She recovered quickly, pushing forward into the next phrase, but she could feel the mistake like a physical pain. And then, just as she was finding her rhythm again, it happened. Stop! The single word, spoken sharply into a microphone, cut through her, playing like a knife. May's hands froze above the keys. I think we've heard enough, Petrov's voice continued, the sound echoing through the now silent hall. Perhaps this level of competition is beyond certain participants' capabilities. May sat perfectly still, her face burning with humiliation. She could hear uncomfortable shifting in the audience, a few whispers, someone clearing their throat. Another voice spoke up, female, authoritative. Mr. Petrov, contestants are entitled to complete their pieces. And waste everyone's time? Petrov replied. The mistake in measure 38 was unrecoverable. The interpretation lacks maturity, and there's no connection with the audience whatsoever. May stood up suddenly, nearly knocking over the bench. Her hands were shaking as she unfolded her cane. She needed to get off the stage, away from the pity she could feel radiating from the audience, away from Petrov's cutting words. Wait, said the female judge. Professor Wu, May guessed. Miss Lin, you're welcome to continue your piece. But May was already walking away, her cane tapping rapidly against the floor as she tried to remember how many steps to the exit. 15, she thought. But in her haste and confusion, she veered slightly off course. Her shoulder bumped against the side of the grand piano, causing a discordant sound as her elbow hit the keys. Someone in the audience laughed, a short, quickly stifled sound that nonetheless reached May's sensitive ears. She bit her lip hard to keep from crying. May, her mother's voice called from the side of the stage. Grace had rushed forward as soon as Petrov had interrupted. May turned toward her mother's voice, desperate to escape. Grace's arm wrapped around her shoulders, guiding her off the stage and into the dimmer, quieter backstage area. Only when they reached the empty practice room did May finally break down, tears streaming down her face. I want to go home, she whispered. Now please, Grace held her daughter tightly. That man is a monster. We should file a complaint with the competition board. What's the point? May asked, her voice thick with tears. He's Viktor Petrov. They're not going to dismiss a world-famous pianist because he was mean to one contestant. He didn't just stop you because of a mistake, Grace said, anger evident in her voice. Other performers made mistakes too. He stopped you because I'm blind, May finished. Because he decided before I even played a single note that I didn't belong here. A knock on the door interrupted them. Grace opened it a crack, keeping her body between the visitor and May. Yes? Grace asked, her tone guarded. Ms. Lin? It was Zoe, the student volunteer from earlier. Professor Wu asked me to come find you. The judges would like to speak with you. May shook her head, wiping at her tears. I don't want to hear anything else Petrov has to say. It's not Mr. Petrov, Zoe said quickly. It's Professor Wu and Professor Tanaka. They're in the small conference room down the hall. Mr. Petrov has gone to lunch. Grace looked back at May questioningly. May took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. Fine, she said finally. Let's get this over with. The conference room smelled of coffee and old books. May sat stiffly in a padded chair, her mother beside her, as Professor Wu explained the situation. What happened today was completely unacceptable, Professor Wu said, her voice warm with concern and cool with professional anger. Mr. Petrov overstepped his authority by stopping your performance. That is not how this competition is run. Indeed, agreed Professor Tanaka, his Japanese accent gentle but precise. Each judge scores independently. No single judge should dominate the process. The thing is, May, Professor Wu continued, your scores from the other 4 judges were exceptional, even with the small mistake, which frankly most contestants make. Your musicality and interpretation were outstanding. May frowned, confused. What are you saying? We're saying, Professor Tanaka explained, that you have advanced to the finals. May's mouth fell open in shock. But how? After what happened? The final selection is based on the combined scores of all 5 judges, Professor Wu said. Even with Mr. Petrov giving you the lowest possible marks, your average was still high enough to place you in the top 10. The finals are in 3 days, Professor Tanaka added. You'll perform your longer piece then. The Rachmaninoff, correct? May nodded automatically, still trying to process what she was hearing. She had made it to the finals. Despite Petrov, despite the mistake, despite everything. Mr. Petrov will still be on the judging panel, Professor Wu warned. We can't remove him at this stage, but he has been spoken to about his behavior. Spoken to by whom? Grace asked skeptically. By the competition director, Professor Tanaka said, and by me personally. I made it clear that such treatment of any contestant would not be tolerated again. As they left the conference room, May's mind was spinning. The joy of advancing to the finals was overshadowed by the knowledge that she would have to face Petrov again, a man who clearly believed she had no place in this competition. What do you want to do? Grace asked as they walked slowly toward the exit. We can withdraw if you want. No one would blame you. May stopped walking. Is that what you think I should do? Grace hesitated. I think you should do whatever feels right to you. If you want to go home, we'll go home. If you want to stay and show that man what you're capable of, then we'll stay. May thought about all the hours of practice, all the sacrifices her mother had made to get her here. She thought about Mr. Reynolds, her piano teacher back home, who had believed in her talent from the first day. She thought about all the other blind musicians who had fought for recognition in a seeing world, and she thought about Petrov's dismissive words. No connection with the audience whatsoever. I need to make a phone call, May said suddenly. Back at the hotel, May sat on the edge of the bed, her phone pressed to her ear. You did what? Mr. Reynolds' voice came through the speaker, heavy with disbelief. I made it to the finals, May repeated. No, not that, though that's wonderful news. I mean about changing your final piece. May, you can't be serious. May took a deep breath. I'm completely serious. I'm not playing the Rachmaninoff. But you've been preparing the Rachmaninoff for months. It's perfect for your style and you play it beautifully. It's not enough, May insisted. Petrov doesn't think I can connect with an audience. He doesn't think I can communicate through music because I can't see. So you're going to play your own composition? Mr. Reynolds sounded bewildered. The one you've been working on? Yes. May, that piece isn't ready for public performance. It's still rough around the edges, and it's so personal. That's exactly why I need to play it, May said, her voice growing stronger with conviction. I've spent my whole life playing other people's music, trying to interpret what they meant, how they felt. But this piece, it's mine. It's how I see the world. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Mr. Reynolds, I'm here, he said finally. I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. The finals of the International Young Musicians Competition is not the place to debut an unfinished composition, especially not against some of the best young pianists in the world playing established masterpieces. If I play the Rachmaninoff, I'll just be another contestant to them, May argued. Maybe a good one, maybe even a great one, but I'll still be the blind girl trying to fit into their world. I don't want to fit in anymore. I want them to see, to hear my world. Another silence. You could be throwing away your chance at winning, Mr. Reynolds warned. Petrov already has it in for you. Playing an original composition instead of a classical piece might just give him more ammunition. I'm not going to win anyway, May said quietly. Not with Petrov judging. But I can still make them listen, Mr. Reynolds sighed heavily. If you're set on this, then at least let me help you polish the piece. We've got 3 days. If you send me what you have now, I can give you some feedback. Thank you, May said, relief flooding through her. I'll send it right away. After hanging up, May turned to her mother, who had been listening silently. Are you sure about this? Grace asked gently. May nodded. I've never been more sure of anything. For the first time since they'd arrived at the competition, May felt a sense of purpose, of clarity. Petrov had humiliated her, had tried to reduce her to nothing more than her blindness. But in doing so, he had inadvertently given her a gift. The courage to stop trying to prove she could be just like everyone else, and start showing the world who she truly was. With renewed determination, May reached for her laptop to send her composition to Mr. Reynolds. The piece was called Unseen, and it was the most honest thing she had ever created. In 3 days, she would share it with the world, ready or not. The next 3 days passed in a blur of intense work. May barely left the hotel room, spending every waking hour at the small keyboard she had brought with her, refining her composition with Mr. Reynolds' guidance over video calls. The transition in the middle section still feels rushed, Mr. Reynolds said on the evening of the second day, his voice tinny through the laptop speakers. You're trying to express too much at once. May ran her fingers through her hair in frustration. But that's how it happened. Everything came crashing down all at once when I lost my sight. One day the world was full of color and shape, and the next day nothing. There was a pause before Mr. Reynolds replied, his voice gentler now. I know, but remember, music needs space to breathe. The audience needs time to feel what you felt. Try slowing it down, adding those minor seventh chords we talked about to create tension before the change. May nodded, though she knew he couldn't see her. I'll try it. As she played the section again with the changes, she had to admit he was right. The slower tempo, the added dissonance before the transition, it created a sense of dread, of approaching darkness, that was far more powerful than the abrupt shift she had originally composed. That's it, Mr. Reynolds said, satisfaction evident in his voice. Now the audience will feel the darkness coming, the way you might have felt it as your sight began to fade. May continued playing, moving into the piece's third movement, the part that expressed her years of adjustment, of learning to navigate the world without sight. The melody here was tentative at first, fumbling with occasional discordant notes representing her mistakes and frustrations. But gradually it found its footing, growing more confident, more complex. Perfect, Mr. Reynolds said when she finished. You've got it now. Just one more thing, the ending, May sighed. The ending had been giving her trouble since she first began composing the piece months ago. It needed to represent where she was now, how she had come to terms with her blindness. But every ending she tried felt either too sad or too artificially triumphant. I still don't know how to end it, she admitted. That's because you're thinking of it as an ending, Mr. Reynolds said thoughtfully. But your story isn't over, May. Maybe the piece shouldn't end with resolution. Maybe it should end with possibility. May tilted her head, considering. What do you mean? Try this, he suggested. After that beautiful run in the upper register, instead of resolving to the tonic, leave it on a questioning chord, maybe a major seventh. Something that feels open-ended, looking toward the future. May played the sequence, ending on the suggested chord. It hung in the air, neither sad nor triumphant, but expectant, waiting. Yes, she whispered. That's it. On the morning of the finals, May woke early, her heart racing before she even remembered why. The familiar knot of anxiety had returned to her stomach, but today it was accompanied by something else, a quiet determination. Grace brought breakfast to the room, but May could barely eat. You need your strength, her mother urged. I'm too nervous, May admitted, picking at a piece of toast. Grace sat on the edge of the bed. Can I hear it? The whole piece? You've been so secretive about it. May hesitated. She hadn't played the complete composition for anyone except Mr. Reynolds. It felt strangely vulnerable, like sharing pages from a diary. Okay, she said finally. But remember, it'll sound different on a real piano. She sat at the keyboard and took a deep breath. Then she began to play. The piece started simply, with a childlike melody representing her early years, the world full of light and color. Then came the change, the slow descent into darkness that Mr. Reynolds had helped her perfect. The frantic middle section captured her fear and confusion, gradually giving way to the more methodical, searching third movement as she learned to navigate her new reality. And finally, the conclusion, not an ending but a question, a door left open to whatever might come next. When the final notes faded, the room was silent. May turned toward where she knew her mother was sitting. Well? She asked anxiously. Grace cleared her throat, and May realized she was crying. It's you, she said simply. Every note of it is you. May nodded, her own eyes filling with tears. That's what I wanted, for people to understand. Grace moved to sit beside her daughter, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. They will. Even Petrov. May wasn't so sure about that, but it didn't matter anymore. She wasn't playing for Petrov's approval. She was playing for something much more important. her truth. The atmosphere backstage at the finals was even more tense than the preliminaries. 10 contestants remained, each scheduled to play a piece that would showcase not just their technical skill, but their musicality, their artistic interpretation. May sat quietly in a corner, running through her composition in her mind, her fingers moving slightly on her lap as if playing invisible keys. Occasionally she would hear snippets of conversation from the other contestants. "Did you hear that girl changed her piece at the last minute? The blind one? Is that even allowed? Apparently she's playing her own composition instead of the Rachmaninoff she registered with. That's career suicide. Petrov hates modern compositions." May tried to shut out their voices, focusing instead on the feel of the music inside her. She had practiced until her fingers ached, until she could play the piece in her sleep. Now all that remained was to share it with the world. "Number 5, Maylene," called the stage manager. "You're on in 10 minutes. Grace squeezed her daughter's hand. "I'll be right in the front row. Just play it the way you played it this morning." May nodded, her throat too dry for words. As she waited in the wings, she could hear the end of the previous contestant's performance, a technically flawless rendition of a Liszt etude that received enthusiastic applause. The bar was high. Everyone here was exceptional. The applause died down and the master of ceremonies announced her name. "Our next finalist is Maylene, performing an original composition titled Unseen." As May stepped onto the stage, cane in hand, she heard a murmur ripple through the audience. They had expected her to play Rachmaninoff, not an unknown piece by an unknown composer. She could almost feel Petrov's disapproval radiating from the judges' table. She found the piano bench without difficulty this time, having memorized the exact number of steps. As she settled herself, folding her cane and placing it beside her, she took a moment to center herself to remember why she was here. Then she placed her hands on the keys and began. The opening notes were delicate, innocent, a child's view of a world full of wonder. May could feel the audience's initial confusion. They had expected something familiar, something safe. Instead, they were being asked to follow her into unknown territory. As the first movement flowed into the second, the melody darkening, growing more complex, she sensed a shift in the atmosphere of the hall. The rustling and coughing had stopped. There was only silence in her music. When she reached the transition into darkness, the part she and Mr. Reynolds had worked so hard on, she poured all of her memory of those frightening days into her playing. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from nerves now, but from the emotion of reliving that time. A woman in the third row began to cry softly. May couldn't see her, of course, but her acute hearing picked up the sound. Someone else was breathing in short, controlled gasps, fighting back their own tears. She moved into the third movement, her fingers dancing across the keys with growing confidence, just as she had learned to move through the world with increasing independence. The melody here was more complex but also more structured, representing how she had learned to organize her new reality through sound, touch, and memory. And then she was approaching the end, not a resolution but a question. The final notes hung in the air, neither triumphant nor defeated but open to all possibility. For 3 heartbeats after she lifted her hands from the keys, there was absolute silence in the hall. May sat perfectly still, her heart pounding. Had she failed? Had her gamble been a mistake? Then someone began to clap. A single person at first, then another and another, until the applause swelled into a roar. People were standing. She could hear the rustle of clothing, the scrape of chairs. "Brava!" someone shouted. "Brava!" May stood uncertain, overwhelmed by the response. She bowed in the direction of the audience, then toward where she knew the judges sat. As she made her way off the stage, the applause still thundering behind her, she was met by a tearful Grace. "They're giving you a standing ovation," her mother whispered, hugging her tightly. "Every single person in that hall is on their feet." May couldn't quite believe it. "Even Petrov?" There was a pause before Grace answered. "I can't see him. He's not at the judges' table." Before May could process this information, Zoe, the student volunteer, appeared beside them, slightly breathless. "May, Professor Wu wants to see you." "Right away." "Is something wrong?" Grace asked. "No," Zoe said, and May could hear the smile in her voice. "I think it's quite the opposite." As they followed Zoe through the backstage area, May could hear excited whispers from the other contestants, feel their eyes on her. For once, she didn't mind the attention. For the first time since arriving at the competition, she felt like she belonged, not because she had proven she could be like everyone else, but because she had finally shown them who she truly was. And somehow, against all odds, they had heard her. Zoe led May and Grace through a maze of backstage corridors, finally stopping at a door marked Green Room. May could hear multiple voices inside, not just Professor Wu's, but several others engaged in what sounded like an intense discussion. "Wait here a moment," Zoe said, knocking lightly before slipping inside. May shifted nervously from foot to foot. "What do you think they want?" she whispered to her mother. "I don't know," Grace replied, squeezing her daughter's hand. "But after that performance, it can only be good news." The door opened again and Zoe reappeared. "They're ready for you now," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. As they entered the room, May immediately sensed that it was crowded. There was the subtle rustle of clothing, the scent of various perfumes and colognes, the feeling of many eyes turned in her direction. "May," Professor Wu's voice came from her left. "Thank you for coming so quickly. Please sit down." Grace guided May to a chair, then took a seat beside her. "First," Professor Wu continued, "I want to congratulate you on a truly extraordinary performance. In my 20 years of judging this competition, I have rarely been so moved." "Thank you," May said softly, still feeling slightly dazed from the audience's reaction. "I'd like to introduce some people who are very eager to meet you," Professor Wu said. "This is Mr. Yoshida from Pacific Symphony Records. Your composition was remarkable," a deep voice with a slight Japanese accent said from across the room. "The emotional journey you created. Most composers spend decades trying to achieve that level of connection with an audience. And this is Ms. Klein from the National Conservatory of Music." A woman spoke next, her voice warm and enthusiastic. "We would be very interested in discussing scholarship opportunities with you, May. Your talent both as a performer and composer is exceptional." May's head was spinning. Record executives? Scholarship offers? This was far beyond anything she had expected. And finally, Professor Wu said, her voice changing slightly, "Mr. Petrov has something he would like to say to you." The room fell silent. May froze, suddenly tense again. She hadn't realized Petrov was in the room. She heard footsteps approaching. Then the creak of a chair as someone sat down directly across from her. "Miss Lin." Petrov's accented voice was quieter than she had heard it before, lacking its usual sharp edge. "I owe you an apology." May's mouth fell open in surprise. This was the last thing she had expected. "I made assumptions about you and your abilities," Petrov continued. "Worse, I allowed those assumptions to influence my professional judgment. This was unforgivable." May didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to agree with him. It was unforgivable. The humiliation he had caused her, the doubt he had planted in her mind, the tears she had shed because of his cruelty. How could she simply forgive that? But another part of her recognized something in his voice that she hadn't heard before. Genuine regret. "Your composition," Petrov went on when she didn't respond, "it helped me understand something I had not considered before. The way you use music to express your experience of the world, it is unlike anything I have heard." He paused, and May heard him take a deep breath. "In particular, the section where you depicted losing your sight, the fear, the confusion, but also the gradual discovery of a new way of perceiving the world. It made me realize how limited my own understanding has been. I have always believed that music is about what we see, about translating visual emotion into sound, but you showed me that it is about what we feel, what we experience regardless of how that experience comes to us." The room remained silent. May could feel everyone watching, waiting for her response. "Thank you for saying that," she said finally. "It means a lot to hear it." She hesitated, then added, "The piece isn't finished yet. It's still evolving, just like me." "That was precisely what moved me most about it," Petrov said, and May could hear a smile in his voice now. "That final unresolved chord. It speaks of possibility of a future still being written. Very few composers have the courage to end without resolution." Professor Wu cleared her throat. "There's something else we need to discuss, May. As you know, the competition rules state that finalists must perform established classical pieces. Your decision to play an original composition should technically have disqualified you." May's heart sank. After all the positive reactions, was she about to be disqualified? "However," Professor Wu continued, "the judging panel has unanimously voted to make an exception in this case. Your performance transcended the usual parameters of the competition. It would be unjust to penalize such extraordinary artistry on a technicality. What does that mean? Grace asked. It means, Professor Tanaka's voice came from somewhere to May's right, that May remains in the competition and will be scored alongside the other finalists. May exhaled shakily. Thank you. There's more, Professor Wu said. Mr. Yoshida has expressed interest in recording your composition as part of a showcase of young composers. And Ms. Klein would like to discuss the possibility of you studying composition at the conservatory, in addition to performance. It was too much to take in at once. Just days ago, May had been devastated, humiliated, ready to give up and go home. Now these incredible opportunities were being presented to her, doors opening that she hadn't even known existed. I don't know what to say, she stammered. You don't have to decide anything now, Mr. Yoshida said kindly. These conversations can happen after the competition concludes tomorrow with the award ceremony. As the meeting wrapped up, May found herself surrounded by people wanting to shake her hand, to give her their business cards, to make arrangements to talk further. Grace helped her navigate the social interactions, whispering names and titles in her ear as people approached. Finally, as the crowd thinned, May found herself alone with Petrov. There is one more thing, he said hesitantly. I have been asked to give a master class at the Salzburg Summer Academy next month. I would be honored if you would consider being one of my students. May was speechless. The Salzburg Summer Academy was one of the most prestigious music programs in the world, a gathering place for the finest young musicians and the most renowned teachers. You want to teach me? She asked, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. I believe we could learn from each other, Petrov replied. Your approach to composition has challenged my thinking, and perhaps I could offer some insight into the technical aspects of bringing your musical ideas to life. May thought about it. The idea of studying with the man who had humiliated her seemed impossible just days ago. But people could change, she knew that better than most. Her own journey had been one of constant change, of adaptation, of finding new ways to understand and interact with the world. I'll think about it, she said honestly. That is all I can ask, Petrov said, and she heard the respect in his voice, not pity or condescension, but genuine professional respect. Back at the hotel that evening, May sat on the bed, phone in hand, telling Mr. Reynolds about everything that had happened. I always knew you were exceptional, he said, his voice crackly over the phone line. But a standing ovation at the International Young Musicians Competition? Scholarship offers? Recording opportunities? This is beyond even my wildest hopes for you. And Petrov, May added, still hardly able to believe it herself. He actually apologized, and invited me to study with him in Salzburg. Mr. Reynolds let out a low whistle. The Salzburg Academy? May, that's incredible. Musicians would kill for that opportunity. I know, she said. I just don't know if I can forgive him that easily. It's not about forgiving him, Mr. Reynolds said thoughtfully. It's about what's best for your development as an artist. Petrov may have been wrong about you, terribly wrong, but he's still one of the finest pianists and teachers in the world. And the fact that he recognized his mistake, that your music changed his perspective, that says something important about him. I suppose, May said, unconvinced. Sleep on it, Mr. Reynolds advised. You don't have to decide anything tonight. Right now you should be celebrating. Whatever happens at the awards ceremony tomorrow, you've already achieved something remarkable. After hanging up, May lay back on the bed, trying to process everything that had happened. Grace came in with a cup of tea and sat beside her. How are you feeling? Her mother asked. Overwhelmed, May admitted. It's like my whole life changed in the span of 15 minutes. Grace laughed softly. That's how it works sometimes. One moment can change everything. Like when I lost my sight, May said quietly. Yes, Grace agreed, but also like today, when you showed the world who you really are. May thought about that. Her blindness had changed her life in ways she could never have predicted. Some devastating, some unexpectedly positive. It had shaped her perception of the world, her understanding of music, her very identity. And now, by sharing that journey through her composition, she had opened doors she hadn't even known existed. Do you think I should accept Petrov's offer? She asked her mother. After everything he did? Grace was quiet for a moment. I think, she said carefully, that great teachers aren't always good people, and good people aren't always great teachers. Petrov was cruel to you, and that was wrong. but he also recognized his mistake and wants to make amends. And he has something valuable to teach you. So you think I should do it? I think you should follow your instincts, Grace said. They've brought you this far, May nodded, considering. Her instincts had told her to change her competition piece, to play her own composition instead of the safe choice. Everyone had thought it was career suicide, but it had turned out to be the most important decision she'd ever made. Tomorrow's the awards ceremony, she said, changing the subject. Do you think I have any chance of winning? Grace squeezed her hand. After what I saw today, I think you have every chance. But May wasn't sure she cared anymore. Something had shifted inside her. Winning the competition had once seemed like the most important goal in the world, the validation she needed to prove herself. Now it felt almost secondary to what she had already accomplished. She had found her voice. She had made people listen. She had changed minds, including the mind of a man who had thought her incapable of true musical expression. Whatever happened tomorrow, she had already won something far more valuable than any competition trophy. The morning of the awards ceremony dawned bright and clear. Sunlight streamed through the hotel room curtains as May sat at the edge of her bed, running her fingers over the smooth fabric of the new dress Grace had bought for her the previous evening. It's deep purple, Grace had told her. Like twilight just before full dark. The saleswoman said it brings out the warmth in your skin. May smiled at the description. She couldn't see colors anymore, but she remembered them. Purple had always been her favorite, the color of mystery, of possibility. Are you nervous? Grace asked, coming out of the bathroom. Not really, May replied, somewhat surprised to find it was true. Whatever happens today, I already got so much more than I came for, and it was true. Her phone had been buzzing with messages since yesterday. Mr. Reynolds sharing her success with everyone back home. Zoe connecting her with other young composers. Even a journalist from a music magazine requesting an interview. I'm proud of you, Grace said, her voice thick with emotion. Not just for how you played yesterday, but for how you've handled everything, the good and the bad. May stood and hugged her mother tightly. I couldn't have done any of it without you. Yes, you could have, Grace said firmly. You're stronger than you know. The grand hall was packed for the awards ceremony. As May and Grace made their way to their seats, May could hear the excited buzz of conversation, feel the energy in the room. All 10 finalists were seated in a special section near the front, with family members beside them. As they settled into their places, May heard a familiar voice behind her. May, there you are. It was Zoe, the student volunteer who had become something of a friend over the past few days. I've been looking everywhere for you, Zoe continued excitedly. There's something you should know before the ceremony starts. What is it? May asked, turning in her seat. Zoe lowered her voice to a whisper. I'm not supposed to tell anyone, but I overheard the judge's final deliberation this morning. It was intense. Petrov fought for you. Fought for me? May repeated, confused. What do you mean? For you to win, Zoe clarified. Some of the judges were concerned about setting a precedent by giving first prize to someone who broke the rules by playing an original composition. But Petrov argued that the purpose of the competition is to recognize exceptional musical talent, not just technical adherence to classical repertoire. May was stunned. Just days ago, Petrov had tried to humiliate her, had dismissed her abilities, had seen her only as her disability. And now he was fighting for her to win? Before she could process this information, the lights dimmed, and the master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage. The crowd fell silent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the award ceremony of the 43rd International Young Musicians Competition. May found herself only half listening to the opening remarks, her mind still spinning from what Zoe had told her. Part of her had assumed that Petrov's apology yesterday had been for show, perhaps pressured by the other judges or competition organizers, but to advocate for her behind closed doors when he had nothing to gain from it. That suggested genuine change. The ceremony proceeded with various minor awards being announced. Most promising newcomer, best interpretation of a modern piece, most technically accomplished performance. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for, the top 3 prizes. In third place, the announcer's voice rang out, with a remarkable performance of Chopin's Ballad No. 4 in F minor. Thomas Novak. Applause filled the hall as a young man a few seats away from me stood and made his way to the stage to accept his bronze medal and certificate. In second place, the announcer continued after the applause died down, with an extraordinary original composition titled Unseen. Maylene? The hall erupted in applause again, even louder than before. May felt a momentary pang of disappointment. She hadn't won, but it was quickly washed away by the realization that she had still placed second in one of the most prestigious youth music competitions in the world. With a piece she had written herself, Grace squeezed her hand. "Go on," she whispered. May stood unfolding her cane. She made her way carefully to the stage, counting steps, remembering the path from yesterday. As she climbed the steps to the stage, a hand reached out to guide her. Professor Wu's, she thought, recognizing the light floral scent of her perfume. "Congratulations," the announcer said, placing a medal around her neck and a framed certificate in her hands. The weight of the silver medal felt substantial against her collarbone. "Thank you," May said into the microphone, her voice echoing through the hall. "I'm honored." As she made her way back to her seat, the applause continued, some people even standing. She felt a glow of pride that had nothing to do with winning or losing, but with being recognized for her authentic voice. "And now," the announcer said once the hall quieted again, "our first-place winner, who delivered a technically flawless and emotionally powerful performance of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Liwei!" The audience rose to their feet as a young man from China accepted the gold medal. May applauded sincerely. She had heard Liwei play during the preliminaries and had been impressed by his remarkable technique and sensitivity. After the ceremony concluded, there was a reception in the large atrium outside the hall. May found herself surrounded by people wanting to congratulate her, to ask about her composition, to discuss her future plans. Grace helped her navigate the crowd, whispering identifications as people approached. "May?" She recognized Petrov's voice immediately. The crowd around her seemed to part slightly. "Congratulations on your silver medal," he said formally. "It was well deserved." "Thank you," she replied. I heard you supported me in the judge's deliberation." There was a pause, and she imagined him glaring around, looking for whoever had leaked this information. "The judge's discussions are supposed to be confidential," he said stiffly. Then his voice softened. "But yes, I did. Your performance yesterday was not just technically impressive, but illuminating. I believe the silver medal is only the beginning for you." May nodded, still trying to reconcile this new Petrov with the man who had humiliated her just days ago. "I've been thinking about your offer," she said. "The Salzburg Academy, and—" There was a note of genuine curiosity in his voice. "I'd like to accept," she said, having made the final decision only moments before. "I think we could learn from each other, as you said." "Excellent," Petrov said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I look forward to it." After he moved on, Grace leaned close to May. "Are you sure about this? About studying with him?" "Yes," May said with quiet conviction. "People can change, Mom. I know that better than most." 6 months later, May stood backstage at Carnegie Hall, her heart pounding with excitement and nerves. After the competition, everything had happened so quickly. The recording contract with Pacific Symphony Records, the scholarship to the National Conservatory of Music, and most surprisingly, her growing professional relationship with Viktor Petrov. The Salzburg Summer Academy had been challenging, but transformative. Petrov was a demanding teacher, pushing May to refine her technique, to explore new compositional structures, to blend classical traditions with her unique perspective. But he also listened to her, valued her insights, and gradually, a mutual respect had developed between them. When Petrov had suggested they perform together at Carnegie Hall, she playing her expanded composition, Unseen, now a full concerto, with him accompanying on second piano, May had been stunned. It was an opportunity most musicians waited decades for. "5 minutes, Miss Lin," the stage manager said, touching her lightly on the arm. May nodded, taking a deep breath. She could hear the murmur of the audience through the heavy curtains, the rustle of programs, the occasional cough or whispered comment. "Nervous?" Petrov asked, appearing beside her. "A little," she admitted. "Good," he said. "Nerves keep us honest. They remind us what a privilege it is to share music with others." May smiled at that. It was exactly what she had come to believe over these past months. That music wasn't about proving herself or impressing others, but about sharing her unique way of experiencing the world. "I never thanked you properly," Petrov said suddenly. For what? For teaching an old arrogant man to see music through new eyes, or rather to hear it through new ears. I had become so fixed in my thinking, so sure that there was only one way to approach music. You showed me how limited that perspective was. Before May could respond, the stage manager returned. It's time. As May stepped onto the stage of Carnegie Hall, cane in hand, she was met with enthusiastic applause. She made her way confidently to the first piano, no longer counting steps but moving with the assurance of someone who knew exactly where she belonged. She sat, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. Beside her at the second piano, she heard Petrov settling himself, ready to accompany her on this journey. The hall fell silent in anticipation. May began to play, the familiar opening notes of Unseen filling the historic space. But the piece had evolved since the competition, growing richer, more complex. Incorporating elements Petrov had helped her develop while staying true to her original vision. As she played, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, the darkness that had once seemed like an ending but had proved to be just a different beginning. She thought about the people who had supported her, her mother, Mr. Reynolds, Professor Wu, and yes, even Petrov, who had moved from adversary to advocate. When they reached the final movement, the new conclusion she and Petrov had developed together, she felt a surge of joy. The piece no longer ended with a question but with a resolution that acknowledged both struggle and triumph, both limitation and possibility. The final notes rang out through Carnegie Hall, clear, confident, and complete. In the silence that followed, May knew with absolute certainty that she had found her place in the world, not despite her blindness but in part because of it. Her unique perspective had become her greatest strength, allowing her to hear and create music that touched people in ways she had never imagined possible. Then came the applause, thunderous, immediate, filling the hall with its affirmation. May Lin stood and bowed, not as the blind girl who had once been humiliated, but as the composer and pianist who had silenced a hall with the power of her music, and in doing so, had found her true voice at last.